I love our official consent announcement, which is
Yeah,
even
I
part of
don't
this
know. I don't
consent.
want people to like, I don't know if people know like how it works because I didn't know how it worked until like the third time we did it. So I always like to give people some warning. I think Zoom has a little pop-up too, but
It does. It
um,
just went today.
anyway, good evening, everyone, and thank you for joining us for the May edition. It is May, right? Yes, the May edition of Jersey Collective Reads, which is our somewhat regular intended monthly book club that we run through Jersey Collective. My name is Kerri Sullivan. I am a public librarian by day. I am the founder of Jersey Collective, and I edited the book New Jersey Fan Club, which came out last summer with Rutgers University Press. And Courtney, would you like to introduce yourself?
Sure. Hi, everyone. I'm Courtney Preiss. I have a novel, Welcome Home, Caroline Klein, coming out next spring with Penguin Random House. And it's a Jersey Shore novel. So obviously have a lot of heart for Jersey writers and Jersey books. Yeah, I'm just really thrilled to be here and thrilled to be talking with Bud Smith, our guest.
Yeah, thank you so much, Bud, for being here. We're really excited to talk to you today about Teenager.
Yeah, thanks for inviting me. Thanks for reading it for the book club.
Yeah, it was great. I've been wanting to read like more of your work for a long time because you were one of those like cool Jersey writers that people were always being like, oh, have you read like Bud Smith's short stories? And I have read some of them, but I was like, oh, I'm excited to spend like a good chunk of time reading your words. So it was really fun.
Yeah, thanks a lot.
Um, I
Go
want to just, I was going to say, I just want to echo that sentiment. And Bud, before you got on the phone, Kerri and I were talking about how I think you have like the coolest author bio I've ever seen. And I had seen it before reading some of your shorter stuff. But if you wanted to just give like a quick intro to you, and we can jump in with some of our questions from there.
Yeah, sure. Well, I live in Jersey City, and I commute just down the turnpike a little bit, and I work in just chemical plants, refineries, nuclear power plants before they shut down. And I work I'm with the Boilermakers Union, so I'm a welder and rigger with those guys and girls. And yeah, we just basically put together. I don't know how to describe like the kind of work we do. It's just usually like heavy. It's called heavy construction, of course. It's usually like metal treat stuff. So it's a lot of, like I said, like welding and rigging. And what's cool about it is just like I love being in the union with like a set amount of people. It's like we just travel from job to job, see each other, and you get to know each. I've been doing it since 2005, so it's like a lot of the same people. And you show up on the job, and oh, this person's there, and oh, their uncle's there, their aunt's there, or something. It's like very it's a very small group of people in my union. There's like, I think we're down to like under 300 Boilermakers in the state of New Jersey. So you get to know everybody really well. Like sometimes like the laborers or like the carpenters or like even the iron workers, there's like 1,000 of them for the county. So there's like right now about 300 to 500 Boilermakers in the whole state. So it's small, but it's like a little specialized kind of construction, building the power plants, refineries, stuff like that. But of course, I'm an author too, and it's for a long time. It was just definitely just a hobby, something I would do. I'd write on my lunch breaks, my coffee breaks on my cell phone, and yeah, through the years, just writing a lot and sending it around. I would come home and I would edit my stuff on the laptop. It kind of like the longer you do it, the more it kind of like changes. It's like, all right, so edit it on the laptop. It's like, oh, well, what happens if I start to retype it on the typewriter, and like just spend time with like trying to understand like what they call the craft of writing, which I really didn't understand too much about all that stuff. I'm a high school graduate, and this has just been like a hobby for me since pretty much since I graduated high school. So it's been going on like 20 years of like a hobby, and a bunch of books, small press books, a bunch of stories, on journals that are gone. And little by little, sometimes things just came out bigger places, and led to just more and more people discovering my work, and people being interested in seeking me out to publish it. That's kind of just been my journey. It's been like a hobby that's kind of like just kept snowballed more and more. And yeah, the book. So this novel came out kind of on the heels of I read a short story at a bar, and I had a literary agent at the time who just found me somewhere at a bookstore. I was doing an interview of someone at the bookstore. I was talking about my construction stuff, and they said, "Well, I want to read your work." So I had an agent, but I read this short story at a bar, and my friend, who was an editor, he was like, "Let me send that out." And I said, "Well, I have an agent, but go ahead." And he wound up selling it to the Paris Review. And once that happened, all of a sudden, my next novel, he was able to sell the next novel to Vintage. So that's how it's kind of gone for me. I've just been like being creative in my free time, and more and more people seem to be just asking me, "Hey, what do you have? And can we read it?" Still a hobby pretty much for me.
That's really cool. How did you know that you were interested in writing? Like, were you always a reader? Was it something that, like, when you were in school, teachers told you were good at? Like, I can't imagine just like, working a construction job and like writing on your lunch break. I'd imagine that's not like a widespread, like, are there a bunch of you sitting around writing on your lunch break, or were you kind of like the odd one out?
They're texting somebody. I don't know. They're just really writing short stories, or they're texting lovely ladies or something. But I'm just sitting there right with them going like this, but I'm writing, for the longest time, weird little pieces of flash fiction that eventually, okay, I finally got this thing published at this place after trying for like so many years, like, sending, I don't know how many short stories to websites. I used to really beloved websites that are just gone now, so it's just like a lot of that, something that it's always been like other people, go bowling on Wednesdays or something. I would I would get drunk and finally send my latest flash fiction pieces to Wigleaf or something. I don't know, but no, there's not a whole lot of guys doing creative stuff on the construction sites. There's the guys that I usually work with are into like dirt bikes, fishing. Everybody drinks beer. That seems pretty universal. But no, I'm one of the only creative ones I know. Sometimes a guy or a girl I know, they have like it's more common, like you hear about their music projects or something.
Oh, cool.
I was going to say, I said this already, that your author bio really stood out to me. Like, it was really striking. I think I had probably read something that you wrote on Hobart or something. Like, I also miss a lot of the literary magazines that are no more, but was a frequent reader of them and would see your work come up. And it was always very striking and memorable to me that it was like, you work heavy construction and you live in New Jersey. And I was like, God, what is cooler than that? And it's great to hear about your process and kind of like carving out that time, whether it's on your lunch break or when you get home, to focus on the craft and the editing and the submission. I'm curious, how, I guess, like, taking those like two things, like how each of those aspects affected the writing itself, or what you like to write about, both, working in heavy construction and living in New Jersey, how you think that comes through in the work at all, if at all.
Sure, no, it does. I mean, that's why I kind of have it in my bio, because I like to write about it a fair amount. It seems like lately my work that's been coming out for like the last, I don't know, maybe 2 years, 3 years or so, it's been like less. Well, I guess that's not true. I still have stuff coming out. Like, I have a story in LA Review of Books right now that's like about, job site stuff. So I love to write about. I love to write about things that I encounter on construction sites, but like in an abstracted way, in a surrealist kind of way, because I think you can always like get closer to the emotion, like surrealist kind of bent to it. So yeah, that's why I put that in my bio. It's just something I'm dealing with like every single day. The people I work with and I'm my closest, companions really, besides my wife. So I feel like, people might see my bio and be like, oh, okay, maybe I can understand what's going on with this weird little piece of fiction I'm reading, if that's kind of in there. Or also, it's like kind of like a disclaimer, like, hey, it's not usually something for me. It's not going to be, you're going to read it. It won't be the most polished thing. It's kind of like a little raw, and I'm still learning as I go. Like I said about the craft of like fiction, like talk about like the process of like, I sit down and for years it was just like, all right, I'm just going to make use of my lunchtime instead of like, waste it. I honestly just wait, I hate to think about like, your downtime in life is like wasted, but it's like I can like eat my sandwich and then just stare at my it used to be MySpace, and then it became Facebook, and then it became Twitter, and then now it's Instagram or whatever else, like the thing you waste your time staring at. I was like, well, maybe I can give my time to like a creative outlet. But as you go along, I think the thing that makes someone like grow as a writer and as an artist, any discipline of art, is like you're kind of you find the wall, you find the wall of like, oh shit, I need to learn more about this, or I need to study this, or and there's what's great about like what we're doing right now is just like the way to find it out is like you get people together and you talk about it and you ask, hey, what did you read that like made you realize that there's more that can be done with make-believe stories, fiction, modern make-believe stories. Because I remember, I remember the ceiling for what I thought a story looked like was a lot different when I was 22 or 23 than what I think of a story now at 42. But I mean, it's fucked up because, the ceiling of literature, you could find it 120 years ago, 110 years ago. I just read almost 100 years ago, To the Lighthouse by Virginia Woolf. I just reread it yesterday. And like reading that book, it's just like, this is a genius, but she had whatever she had, so she had all Tolstoy and Balzac, whatever Virginia Woolf was reading and studying, she went down the same path. And I always find it endlessly inspiring because it's like you can be on any part of the path with all that stuff. I meet people all the time who are in MFA programs, and they're like, they're right there with it. They're studying with like professors who have they've made this their life's work to study this stuff to teach other people how to do it. And I'm just like reading a book and going on Amazon algorithm. When I was 20, it was eBay books, and they would say, oh, read this one next, and read it like blindly, to try to figure it out until finally I, got smart enough just to go find the people who had studied it a little bit more professionally than I had, in order to ask some questions. What did your professors have you read? What did they say about it? What do you think about this? And life is like just a big opportunity for self-study, but also organized study. And you can find organized study in all kinds of different ways, academically, pure academically, or you can find it from your neighbors, a novice thing that can almost be as useful, but will come out a little different. So when people read my bio and, oh, this guy works heavy construction and he's a writer, I just want people to kind of maybe feel slightly empowered to just realize, there's a lot of different paths. Everybody has a job. That's the other thing. Everybody. And people want to talk to me all the time about my like job and stuff, but it's my own fault too, because I talk about it. But the hardest working people I know are the adjunct professors. Believe it or not, they're working the hardest, and they're the ones I always look to. Like, damn, they work a lot harder than me.
Yeah, I've had a lot of people ask after I sold my novel if I was going to quit my day job, and I'm like, no. Does anybody quit their day job? Like, I don't
People
know.
asked me that too, and I thought it was very funny. I laughed very hard every time.
Yeah. And yeah, I mean, everybody has a job. The job always adds something to the work somehow. It permeates the work somehow. And yeah, but to your point, I think that it's really, I don't have an MFA either, but I think it's really interesting to kind of seek out, like, I'm very grateful to my friends who do have MFAs because they kind of like point me in that direction, and they can curate reading lists for me, and we can talk about the kind of stuff that they talked about. And Kerri, I'm sure Kerri's a librarian and has that sort of curatorial position from where she sits as well, and it doesn't have to sit within the bounds of like this formal structure or anything.
Yeah, it's all as formal as you want to make it anyway. Like I know so many people who, good friends of mine who have gone to MFA programs and made it very amateur hour, disruptive, rejecting everything they were being taught, and they did great too. So I mean, that's like, you can go there and bring an apple for the professor and read everything they tell you to, or you could say, no, this isn't how literature works, and no, I don't want to be a professor. It's like, I don't know what to say about people should study what they're passionate about, and for sure, there's the most passionate people I've ever met are people who are passionate about the art they make. I guess the passionate people who love their children, and then the passionate people who make art or whatever. It's like I said, a lot of my other friends are like into their dirt bikes or something, but I don't seem quite as passionate about their dirt bike as I am about my 18th draft of the next novel. You know what I mean? They're ready to sell the damn thing, dirt bike, and get a new one. Or I don't want to sell them. I want to just keep working.
That's funny. Let me see. I have a list of questions here I'm looking at, but I want to talk a little bit about teenager itself. Also, so it kind of going off of what you were just saying. What are some things that maybe you were reading while you were working on it, like other maybe like road trip things or things about people that age, or anything that also like you just kind of feel like is in conversation with your book if people are looking for something else to read now that they've finished it, that they're wanting to stay kind of, something similar?
Sure. Yeah. Well, first off, the original like kernels of that novel when it was written, it was pretty much like travel logs I kept the first time I went cross country, maybe like pieces of the second time I went too. So I used to try to do that when I could, just to get out of my, it wasn't that small of a town, but just to kind of get out of my, hop in someone's car who's going west and see what else there was. But I never just thought I was really, interesting enough to, hey, this is On the Road too. This Bud Smith story of I'm in a car, man, so it was whatever. I would write these, my experiences down of like seeing things in other parts of the country, but I never really had any plans on doing anything with it. But eventually, like, time passes, and found some characters to give some of that stuff to. And the other thing about teenagers, just kind of like playing with what my take on, it's like the Starkweather murders as American myth, as a mutated like folk tale kind of thing. And this story has been like told and retold many, many times by many other artists, made into many movies. Mutated versions of this have been Bruce Springsteen albums, or have been part in Natural Born Killers. It comes from Bonnie and Clyde somehow, and it's all just, of course, when I was in, I think I was just beginning my junior year, all of a sudden, mass shootings just started. So I was just being in school when Columbine happened, I'm just thinking about like the novel, if anyone has read the book, it opens up with a pretty visceral just shooting in the beginning. And all that stuff's just like on my mind for many, many years. And just the idea of when you're at that age, when you're at that those teenage years where you kind of don't have the experience yet to know whether or not the decisions you're going to make are going to be terrible long term, they're going to be worth it for the short term. So there's a lot of knee-jerk reactions of things that happen to people who aren't quite raised right, and it's not their fault sometimes. It's just the way that people are raised. You blink your eyes and all, I can't believe I did that. So you take something like Starkweather murders, let's say. It's just like a person who's seemed like the guy was just really fucked up, really terrible person. And it gets like turned into this like twee little sweet love story thing almost in Badlands, the movie. And you're like, how are like both sides of that possible? But that's the American distortion. That's what we do. I mean, we're not alone in that. There's so many other countries who are in love with their vomit too. So some of the books that influenced teenager. So I already gave you a couple movies there. So it's Raising Arizona, it's Badlands, it's True Romance. Believe it or not, I've never seen National Killers. I watched Bonnie and Clyde right as I was turning in the final draft of this book, just to kind of see, like, I was like, all right, I hope I'm not aping anything too close. It all comes from the same source. Eventually people just kind of like, wincing and sneering at like, this cutesy punk version of like American filthy crime shit. So it's like all from the same well. But I can talk about some of the novels and some of the let's say short story collections and books of poems and stuff that I read while I was like, knew I was almost ready to like sell the book or whatever. I had the book. It was going to come out with a smaller press. I was so excited about it. New York Times was going to put the book out, and then there were some problems because of the pandemic and business side of things with the press, and the book was going to be on hold for a long time. And the editor who had acquired the book gave it back to me and said, "Hey, Adam, it's not really going to work. It's not going to work with the timeline." So now I had the book, and it was in like third person at that point because it had been in first person. Originally, when I wrote it, it was like it was basically maybe like a 15,000 word version of the novel that was told twice. So it was once from Cody's point of view, and then once again from Teal's point of view. And it's basically the same story, but I hadn't like really realized that like I don't like to read those kind of books. Like, you read a book and it's like undoing what it told you, or like kind of like, oh yeah, don't believe that, it's like I'm already reading like a dream or whatever. So eventually, like what I wound up doing was consolidating both sides of that into a first person version of it, just from Cody's point of view, where it was like he understood a little bit more of like, he was more aware of who he was. And that was cool. That was fine. But the book gained a lot of power when the disgusting day when I was like, I think this thing needs to be in third person, which means I have to like change all of I need to get away from a little farther away from the narrator a little bit, and like feel the place and everybody else a little bit more. So like I said, it's that amateur hour thing where I'm always in, where I'm like, man, I know what I got to do, but I know it's going to be a lot of work. And I know I have to really study, and I'm not very good at writing in third person, so I have to learn how to do it. And it was just sitting down and trying to learn how to write in the third person for a while. And eventually finished that draft. And then the real study kind of began, because I was like, well, fuck, I mean, maybe I always feel like I feel less and less like this now, but I feel like I'm a decent reader. I was always a decent reader, but I've read like a lot of modern contemporary stuff, a lot of underground modern contemporary stuff. But I was like, man, I haven't read any of the classics. I hadn't read enough women, people not from America. I hadn't read like just to like actually learn like what is possible in fiction, right? So then I just had this like ridiculous list of like, well, what are the best books I've read that I've never read? And it's like an easy list to like start, put it on my fridge and I'd be like, well, I've never read Hamlet. Okay, well, let's start with Hamlet, I never read Macbeth, and I never read, I've never read Anna Karenina. I've never read Madame Bovary. So it was like this list of like, it became like very addictive. Like I better read like the best books ever written. So I remember having this list going while I was like trying to get up the juice to like do my big final push to retype the manuscript of Teenager on my typewriter. So the idea was to retype it. I think it was like 5,000 words a day, retyped on the typewriter. And then, so the next day I would just do 5,000 more, but at night I was reading like what I would consider like the ceiling of literature that I had not experienced, like the easy layup. Like, you type, what are the 100 best novels? What are the best plays by Shakespeare? All that stuff. And just running down that list, just trying to see, where that stuff lies and what it has to offer. Don't mind the ambulances and the police outside my window. But I don't know, that's a lot of babble I just gave you, but that's kind of like, that's the goal. It's just like figuring out what's out there that could feel challenging and inspiring and a little difficult, like it's not like, I'm not saying Ulysses or whatever is like the hardest book to read or whatever, but like to sit down and like have the goal of, okay, I'm going to read 20 pages of this every day. And I'm going to read 20 pages of Ulysses on my like lunch break, between like my coffee break and my lunch break at work. Just try to do it, right? And like get through the whole thing. And like to read the Virginia Woolf stuff, To the Lighthouse, to read, Mrs. Dalloway and The Waves. It just becomes like, it feels so good, it feels so exciting. And it feels like that's what happens with Teenager. I feel more like I didn't feel strange at all about any of the choices of like the flights of fancy or like the abstraction. I was like, oh, I recognize this stuff. I recognize it in Don Quixote. And I just kind of found like-minded people that were doing it 500 years ago. And you're kind of like discovering stuff that feels so fresh. And you're like, well, fuck, they did this in 1608. Okay, I'm doing it on my cell phone now at the toxic waste plant too.
It's the remix.
It's the remix, yeah. We're still the same people, more or less. We're just, our attention is focused other places, but our art isn't too different than it used to be. Our subjects have slightly changed, but we're the same. We have the same minds, we have the same hearts. And if you believe in a soul, the same souls, whatever,
Very true. I just, I loved all of that and love to hear about the process. And it kind of blows my mind to know that an original iteration of the novel was, that first person dual POV. And I can just imagine the heavy lift of, it's very hard to write in third person. So it's a heavy lift to kind of turn the ship around at that point. You had mentioned that you made, I think, at least 2 cross-country trips. I'm curious to know, like, maybe in total, how many cross-country trips you've taken or big road trips like this, and also maybe if there was on your travels like a state that inspired you most to write, or a state or like an area, I guess, that you particularly gravitated towards or found yourself returning to while writing this. I loved so many of the descriptions in here, but like I think it's like the back third of the book where they get to California and there's like 2 pages of California description that really just was so arresting for me. And yeah, I'm curious to know like what sort of states, obviously we're like a Jersey based convo, but like even outside of New Jersey, what sort of states you gravitate toward and make you want to write about them?
Well, yeah, I mean, I remember, first of all, I'll talk about states that are kind of like New Jersey a little bit. Whenever I've been down to West Virginia a few times, and I felt very, very like, oh, these people are from New Jersey still, East Coast people. Some very similar kind of mindset. A lot of people in West Virginia to like the disgruntled New Jersey, kind of like the states that like, you know, oh, people are like they want to pick on certain states. Obviously, like, you know, West Virginia gets picked on for different reasons than New Jersey does, but they're both such like specific places in the country where you're like, okay, yeah, I know where I am. I know where I am right now. And so I don't know. I'm just kind of like I've always been a big fan of these states that just like, you know, get picked on for like existing. If that makes sense. It's probably just because people. And I mean, literally, I don't work like in toxic waste, but I get it. Okay, you know, I totally understand. But it's like yes, it's in a slightly industrial wasteland when you land in Newark, New Jersey, and you see where I work. That you're just seeing my workplace is all. The city of Newark is beautiful, and like the culture and the people are amazing, and like you can't beat it. But like when your plane is flying over the refinery where I work, it looks like Mordor or something. It's where the Joker dies in the first Batman movie. You know what I'm saying? It's like, oh, I don't want to be there. Isn't that one of the stages from Mortal Kombat? I recognize that place, but like obviously, you know, you get away from this area that I love still. And I think most people are from New Jersey in this book club. Maybe you're not, but we have most of the geography of the country represented. It's sometimes in smaller doses here in New Jersey, if like you spend time and like really get around to all the corners of the state. So that was like my experience of like, obviously, you know, you get a car at 17 back then and just drive it as far as you can on a tank of gas and back. And, you know, you see all that stuff. You know, you get out into the Pine Barrens and, you know, you get up to the four corners of the northwest New Jersey, and there's forests and there's almost like mountains. And, you know, you're getting down to the farms in southern New Jersey, and obviously you have the beaches. And of course you have the cities too, you know, and then you have the sprawl of the regular suburbs. It feels like there's just a lot of the country packed into this small little biodome or microcosm or whatever you want to call it. So breaking out from this area when I was 20 was the first time I went. And my girlfriend at the time, she had saved up all this money to go on this cross-country trip. She was going to go for like 3 months, and she was like, all right, well, I guess we're breaking up because I'm going, bye. And I was like, oh, fuck, all right. So then she called me when she was in like Vegas, and she said, oh, you can come if you want. I said, all right. So she had driven all the way to Vegas, and I flew there, and that was the first time and that I'd gone when I was 20. And just the experience of suddenly being out west after having never really left the tri-state area, let's say, in a car. And that feeling of just being 20, everything's exciting. You know, you can't, even drinking hasn't gotten old yet because you haven't really like gotten to do much of that yet, you know, a little bit of it. But like how exciting it was to be out west for the first time and like seeing real mountains and seeing what real rivers look like. And like, oh, I thought we had this stuff where I'm from. And yeah, we do on like a smaller scale, but like to break out into the western part of the country was so exciting. And I was just very taken by it out there, as many people are. I've spent a lot of time out west, and I wouldn't want to really live out west full time because I like having the seasons, you know. So when I say out west, mostly I mean California or like the desert states. It's like you really don't, you know, you're missing out on fall, you're missing out on spring. But you have summer all year, whatever it is. You don't get the leaves change and all that typical stuff. But I remember one of the last times I went cross country, it wasn't a real cross country trip. It was like flying out west to just to the Grand Canyon with my brother when he was 36 or 37, and I was like a year older than him. So maybe I was 38 or whatever, 37 or 38. And I was watching him the whole time as we were going west, like because I wanted, you know, it's like when you watch one of your favorite movies for the first time with somebody, you're like annoying about it. You're like, oh, I don't know what they're going to say. What's he going to say when, you know, Josh, what are they going to say? How are they going to feel or say? What are they going to say about Joshua True? And the reaction was just, it was that of a 38-year-old man, you know. It was like, But I remember like when I saw it when I was like 20, I was like just leaping out of my skin with excitement and like just feeling this like feeling of like exuberance. So that was really like, you know, the big push to write this novel was to. The book's called Teenager. It's because it captures the exuberance of that youth and the feeling those things for the first time. And when they're like, it's like an endorphin rush and like less time to react and be jaded about anything, even though you have all the reason in the world to be cynical and crushed by things, just to like experience them for the first time with that rush of newness and excitement. And though you should be beaten down by life already, these two characters, there's just not time. They know there's only a little bit left and there's no time to dwell on the bad.
Yeah, I think that all really comes across. I wanted to, this was a good segue. I wanted to ask you about the setting, specifically the New Jersey part, because the book starts out in New Jersey and then they leave and they have to leave really. But I was wondering if, so I know you live in Jersey City now. Are you from the Pine Barrens? Is that where you grew up?
Yeah, I grew up on the edge of the Pine Barrens. So I grew up in a town called Bayville, which is right south of, you know, Beechwood, Toms River, right south of there. And grew up, went to high school in Bayville. One of the people in this group right now, Katie Rundy, we went to high school together. And Katie, today is the publication day of her paperback for The Shore.
Yes,
And,
that was our first Jersey Collective Reads pick back in January.
Yeah, we were in an English class together. And yeah, so I'm from there. I'm from down on the edge of the bay, really, right south of Seaside. So we drive up 10 minutes, 15 minutes to get to the Seaside. Let's go to Seaside Park, where Katie's book takes place.
Gotcha.
Yeah, a lot of time spent in the Pine Barrens. I grew up in a campground in Bayville, Cedar Creek Campground. So a lot of, you know, it was a house in Cedar Creek Campground, but like also a lot of just playing in the Pine Barrens, and a strange place to grow up because, you know, there's no kids around, you know. There are in the summertime, of course, but then the fall and the winter, and there's no neighborhood kids. So it's just, you gotta find something to do. So it's drawing and reading and writing weird little stories. Early age.
Why did you want the characters to be from there? Was that because like you obviously you've traveled, you've experienced other parts of the country and even other parts of the state because of your work and where you live now. So what was it about the Pine Barrens that you thought like these characters are from the Pine Barrens and that's where they're going to start this journey from?
Well, there's a couple of reasons. I mean, I really thought I just like knew these two people. Maybe they were just like people I had seen around my whole life, just like in the periphery. I knew a lot of Italian American girls from down where I was from, and it's like a different. I mean, it's like that everywhere you go. You know, the Italian American girls from the Jersey Shore are different from the Italian American girls who live in New Mexico, who are different from the Italian girls who live in Italy. But so I wanted to write about Italian American family from the Pine Barrens and Teenager, and I read about Till Carticelli being from there. I really got to know a lot more about Italian American communities in Ocean County, where I'm from. When I started dating my wife, her last name's Baleri. She drew all the pictures in the book too. So it's kind of like a lot of writing about the. Obviously, her father is nothing like, you know, Arturo Carticelli, but just the feeling of like the decorations of the house and like what the family is, you know, is excited about, and what Teal kind of like. I just feel like I knew her, and I feel like, you know, she's a person from where I was from, and of course, you know, selfishly, that whole trope of manifest destiny. You know, if the goal is to follow a trail of blood and guts, you know, to the West Coast, you have to start on the East Coast. And once I was in a little just slightly up to my knees in it, I was like, I started writing about like you get out to like the middle of the country, so you start reading about the cowboys. And I was like, man, it'd be so fucking funny for like for the big cowboy guy to be from like Pawtucket, Rhode Island. So that was like something I was like writing towards, like feeling inadequate as like how Cody does and like how Teal does, and like how they're just like, they're looking for something and they feel like they're kind of like faking their way through in the jubilance, to meet someone who's like, oh, this guy's got it all figured out, even though Teal kind of sees it right away. Cody like falls for it, like hook, line, and sinker, but he's never had like a real, positive male role model. So he's, really the first semi-positive male role model he gets before you really get to know him anyway. He latches onto this guy. Then to Holden Caulfield, that, oh God, he's a phony. He's a phony. He's from, like, a cowboy has to be, you have to be from Montana to be a cowboy, you don't. Are there cows?
Or Wyoming, maybe.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Do you break wild horses in Connecticut or Rhode Island? Then you're a cowboy, I guess, right? I knew this. Another thing that, and when I was starting to write this book, was I had seen. I just kind of always like make fun. I feel like life's a joke anyway. But like we were talking about, like the Bud Smith heavy construction thing. It's just like, that's just like my life, it's just what I'm doing. And I feel like it's just, I get up and I go there almost every day. I'd seen this guy though on social media who, like, his thing was being like a cowboy, he was a real fucking cowboy. And I was like, where's this guy from? So I like looked more into it and I was like, can you be a cowboy in Ohio? I was like trying to figure it out. I was like, I don't know, maybe you can, and maybe I got to go to Ohio and see the deal. But it didn't seem like you were saying, you got to be from Wyoming or Montana or something. So I don't know. So you put these people in New Jersey because they are the same kind of people that have the same kind of slightly skewed outlook that you have from your youth, if you're going to write about your youth, not about your life, but like your feelings of like excitement and I don't need to always write about people from New Jersey because certainly if you're going to try to capture that excited feeling of leaving a place, you'll never feel more excited about leaving the place that you're from. And you can write about people from other places to capture other kind of feelings. Is one way.
Kerri, I think maybe we should open up to our audience for any questions. We certainly have a few questions left, but want to give everyone a shot if you guys wanted to jump in with any questions you might have had for Bud. Also, shout out Katie Rundy, who is here and is a friend of the book club and our inaugural book, The Shore, which we have gushed about many times over. Absolutely get the paperback. Beautiful cover. I'm very attached to my hardcover because Katie signed it, but I'm constantly recommending this book. So I need to buy the paperback as my like loaner copy. And highly recommend everyone here does the same, and anyone who's watching this later. Love that book.
Thank you. I jumped the gun on the last book club question, so I'm not asking the first one. I had too many questions for your last book club, but I have.
We
That's
love
okay.
it.
Yeah, we have time.
Okay,
I
will
go for it.
But I felt I was so anxious with the last writer you had on. I like interrupted the entire thing to ask my question. So it's really question time. I'm not interrupting anybody. So yeah, Bud mentioned that we went to the same high school, where it's really interesting because like it makes no sense that my town went to the high school in his town. I rode on a bus for like 45 minutes past like 3 other high schools to get to the town where the high school is, but we went to the same high school. And so I know Bayville really well. And I'm really curious about writing that area because it's like, I'm just curious about what it's like looking back, because we have that experience in common of like writing your hometown a very long time later. And I'm really curious about like how much you included, what you fictionalized. You don't stay there that long in teenager. Like, so yeah, what you chose to include, what you kind of like focused in on, and what it was like to do that so long after living there.
Yeah. Yeah, I guess it's like in early drafts of anything, it's like you just go in any direction and you kind of figure out, and then it's like the editing of it kind of helps you figure out like, all right, well, what is like the most vital thing? What's the reason why I'm bothering even to like write about this place? And it kind of just funnels, everything gets funneled down. So it might start off in like a wide scope, you can write about all the stores in the strip mall and everything, and but it gets kind of whittled down to like what is the most potent. And I'm not even talking about like working with like an editor. I just mean like as you go and like retype the thing for like which is something I got into with this book especially, and it became something that really helped my like process of there's a fire or someone got shot or something.
No worries. I live around the corner from a
Yeah.
fire station too. It's like the same thing over here all the time.
But it's like as you go and like retype something again, reread it again, retype it, it just kind of whittles itself down, and like you serve only what's vital for the story and for the characters. But I've written a lot about where I grew up, where I'm from, and as much as I try to like be specific to the place and the people, time and time again, it's just like for me, like coming back to that, it's like I'm not sure what's invented after a while and what was like kind of real. It's like it's all just like this blur of like a thing, you kind of like you revisit things in your mind so many times, and like your memories. Every time you have a memory, recall something, you rewrite it a little different just in your memory, so it's like it becomes this fuzzy thing where you're just kind of like drawing on a feeling that you're not even sure how true the experience is. There was I had put up something on like my Substack or something, like maybe like a year before Teenager came out. I think that's how we like reconnected, Katie. And you were asking me like how I was like writing so close to like that place and that memory and that time. And I had the same experience with like I wrote this book work. This is like it's out of print right now, but it's like a memoir, but it's a lot of it's just about my time living on 173rd Street in New York City, but like half the book is probably just about like Bayville, New Jersey, Seaside Heights, and like my time in those places. And the book's really hard to find right now. It's out of print. If somebody wants to, just email me and I'll send you a PDF of it. I think eventually it's going to come back out with, at least in paperback, with maybe the same publisher they're saying that I have now. It might be a little bit. But anyway, so like my mom was saying, she's like, man, you have like such a vivid memory for like this. How do you remember all that shit? And I was like, I feel like I'm not remembering it at all. Like I'm making a lot of shit up, like in the feeling of that stuff, not to try to like be as accurate as possible, but to just capture how it felt. And I think sometimes that's like close enough for anybody who's not like trying to solve a murder with your work, literally trying to track down clues. I come across it too, like, like listening to a podcast or something when it's like somebody analyzing a book that was written, like maybe Virginia Woolf would be like a perfect example. Someone would be like, so what's the real story behind like To the Lighthouse? Who were these exact people in time, and what weekend were they in Scotland in this part of the book, and what year was all this stuff where it's like they're like matching it up with the real historical figures and like all this stuff where I'm like, I don't think Virginia Woolf, I know for a fact Virginia Woolf never thought anyone would do that. didn't care about that, was just making art out of it, out of this hazy, ephemeral thing that she probably barely could even, she has more of a grasp of things than I do. That, you know, you make art out of stuff. And then later on, just to imagine that someone is like treating it as like forensic science, they're applying like, physics to it. You're like, holy shit, the laws of physics do not apply to this. But there are copy editors. And then, the laws of physics do. You have to answer to the laws of physics. So
It's a very particular place, and I like it really captures if the short version of that is like going for Bayville vibes, it does it so beautifully. So
yeah.
anyway. I'll go back in my Zoom hole.
Thank you for asking that, Katie. This is why we need your questions though. Like I would sign up for a seminar of like the two of you talking about writing the hometown. So like,
let's do that. Yes.
Yeah.
I'm really going back. I'm really going back now.
I would be the first to register for that seminar. So, if anybody else has any questions, we have like 5 minutes left. I saved some goofy questions for the end. I like to save the goofy ones for the end so we don't scare the author off in the first half of the conversation. But audience questions take precedence. So if anybody has anything else, feel free to jump in.
You can type it in the chat too if you're shy, but you can also unmute yourself and just ask. And you don't have to put your camera on. Don't be scared.
All of these are options. I'm going to goof it up in the meantime while you guys think about if you want to type anything in the chat. But I'm curious, if somebody was taking a road trip through New Jersey, do you have any favorite New Jersey tourist attractions, roadside attractions, New Jersey specific foods, places that you would recommend that they stop on like the idyllic Bud Smith, this is New Jersey road trip tour?
Well, I don't know. I guess there used to be like so many food places that were like so strange in the towns where I'm from now. And they don't mean anything to anybody else, but like I remember I was recently driving to where my in-laws live, and there's this little restaurant on the side of the road it's like a halfway decent place. But I remember when I used to live behind it, and this sounds like so fake. It's going to be unbelievable, but they didn't have ketchup or mustard bottles. They had like bleach. They had bleach bottles, like old that they had cleaned out, and they had the ketchup and the mustard in like bleach jugs. And I swear to God, and when I tell people that, they're like, "That's the most outlandish thing I've ever heard." But like my mom, and my dad, and like we all like they'll always like come go to bat for me with this place, and that's on 537. If you were driving up Bay Avenue and you're going towards Great Adventure, it was on the left-hand side. I lived in a house behind it before the campground. You can't go there. I guess why am I recommending a place that doesn't exist?
No, you perfectly understood the assignment. Like this is exactly what I'm asking for. I also grew up a little 537 adjacent, so now I'm like, have I been to this bleach place?
Yeah.
This is great.
Like our Krauser's right next to it. Oh man, I wish I remember the name of it. It was like Dickerts or something like that. I'm gonna ask my parents and find out if they remember the name of it.
Love that. I have one quick, maybe it's not quick, kind of last question. You had mentioned that your wife did the illustrations in the book, which I also really loved and add so much. What was the process of collaborating with your spouse? Like, what was that like?
It was wild. It was completely unexpected and it was like a total surprise. The quick version of how it all happened was, like I said, the book was going to come out with Tyrant Books, and things happened business-wise and pandemic-wise. Got the manuscript back, was given like, green light, please, see if you can find another home for it. So my dear friend who had become my agent after he saw me read a short story at a bar, he sold it to the Paris Review, and then 3 or 4 weeks after he sold that to the Paris Review, he sent the manuscript out to Todd Portnevitz at Knopf, who's the editor who acquired the book. And he sent it to Todd, and Todd was like, I love this book. I want to acquire it. I want to buy it. And the first notes I got, not even notes, it was just like, you know, my agent, my friend really became my agent. He was like, hey, so how would you feel about like the book having like illustrations? And I was like, illustrations? I was like, holy fuck, what are you talking about? Like a novel with illustrations in it. I don't know. But I was like, well, fuck, tell him sure. Tell him yeah, because then I'll figure out a way to weasel out of that. In like, you know, because I figured like all they're gonna do is it's a suggestion, and they're gonna like try to pair it up with some artists, and they're never gonna give me someone who's gonna make me happy. You know what I'm saying? And I hate to be like sound negative about things, but there's so many times in life when people like, I feel like they don't get quite what you're doing, and they suggest things, and it feels like, wow, I don't know. And this felt like that, but I think I was totally wrong. But I had to be convinced because a couple of days later, I came home from work, and Ray, who, you know, we'd already done a book where she illustrated it. And it was called Dust Bunny City, and it's amazing experience to do this book with my wife. She's my girlfriend at the time, I think, still. And I came home, and Ray was like, hey, so I got a pitch today from my agent about a job. What would you think about me doing the illustrations for Teenager? And I was like, well, that sounds cool. I would be into that, I guess, because I was just gonna give them the runaround until they gave up, and, you know, just put the book out without any drawings in it. Because like I was like, how would that be cool enough? Like it's not. And I mean, I'm not like it wasn't an idea I had, you know. So so once it was like, wow, they would let Ray illustrate this thing. And then we started talking about it, and I was like, well, how do you see the illustrations? And she was like, she's like, I think there'd be like 100 of them. And I was like, okay. So the next step was she wrote to the editor, Todd Portnevitz, and said, well, I want to draw like 100 sketches for it. He's like, do it. That sounds great. And he was like, I'll give you a list in a week of like my ideas of like things you could sketch. So it was like off to the races, and it was exciting the whole time, and it was really organic, and it was no one stepped on anybody's toes with it. It was just like, I don't think this is gonna work. It's not gonna. We'll see. And next thing I know, you know, Ray had like a whole list, and she was just drawing them like crazy, and it was the most amazing thing. I'm sorry we're going over time a little bit, but I wanted to talk a little. It was one of the best experiences of my life, because the world shut down and it was the pandemic. So now I was like, I had nothing to do, and I was in the middle of retyping the novel again, even though I had, you know, it's sold. I'm always like, all right, so 11th hour, I'm gonna retype this thing again, and so when I turn it in, it's like, you know, I know it's as good as I could possibly do. So I would read 5,000 words of it to Ray, and then she would give me critiques on it and comments. I'm like, all right, and then she would have like more things to draw, and she would like kind of critique the novel and like, you know, rip it apart a bit and say, I don't know, that part kind of sucked. And I'd be like, yeah, I know, I can make it better, I think. And then she would show me the drawings she had done, and I'm like, that's not good enough. That's really not good enough. Like, how is this going to be good enough? And she's like, well, how's the book good enough? And I'm like, exactly. It's all not good enough. We got to both do better. We really have to stop fucking around. We got to like make this good, or why bother? You know? So it was like that for weeks. And it was so exciting and so fun, and like, I'll never get an experience like that again in my life. You know, no one is ever going to organically just say, I want someone to do this project, and we want to team up with somebody, and then organically a friend of mine asked my wife, would you be interested in the job? And I come home from work, and she's like, guess what I'm doing? And I would just be like, life is one big surprise, isn't it? But it turned out to be like the most exciting and like wild. But she would give me suggestions on the book, and she'd be like, I remember the first time I read it, I only read it out loud one time, but I got to the end and she was like crying, and she was like crying, and I was like, oh, wow, awesome. Oh man, this is great. I did so good. And she's like, it's so fucking bad. It's not good. And I'm like, oh man, really? She's like, you can do so much better. She's like, you got to change that, like the ending. And I was like, well, I'm totally not going to do that. I'll rewrite it a bit, and I'll try harder. But that's how we approach this project, like really, being like brutally honest and like searching for like a truer, better way for all the things. Like I would look at her drawings and I would say, like, man, I know that idea is great. It's not loose enough. You can, I know you can get there. You just have to like let go. So she was doing the same thing for me, and I was doing the same thing for her. And I feel so incredibly lucky it got to happen. And I'm going to be sad when my next book comes out. It doesn't have any illustrations from Ray, but we did just team up on another thing just recently. I wrote a short story. It's coming out from the Southwest Review, and they wanted it like illustrated. So it's got color illustrations. It's going to be in the next issue of the Southwest Review. It's a really long story. It got cut from my next book. It's a book of short stories. It's my favorite fucking book in the story. It's about Bayville. It's actually about Bayville, New Jersey. It takes place right next to Blackbeard's Cave in Bayville, New Jersey. This guy winds up taking care of a lion in Blackbeard's Cave. But anyway, so like Ray got to do the full color illustration for the magazine. That's great.
I'm very moved to both laughter and tears. That's a better collaboration story than I could have imagined. So
oh my God,
thank you.
It's so great. That's how it always is with us. We're just like always making stuff together. It's been that way. It's been that way for like 20 years. She's got her art desk in the back of the room, and I'm at my usually like my little cart where I have my typewriter or something. And and then the goal of the evening is just to laugh around the stereo with some beer. If you're doing that, that's a good night.
Truly from your mouth to God's ears. Yeah, thank you so much again. This is such a great conversation. I'm so grateful for your time, and I'm grateful for this book. I read part of it while I was on a road trip in the Midwest, and it was just like the absolute vibe. Kerri, if you want to take us out.
Yeah, thank you so much, Bud, for all of that. That was so great to hear from you, and thank you everyone for coming. There was so much. I feel like we could keep talking forever because there's so many other things that we didn't even talk about, like the surrealism in the book, and just like earlier when you said something about like your writing being raw, I wanted to also add that like I think it's very polished, and I think the way you drill down and like don't waste a word and just you do so much in such small spaces, I think is so impressive, and that definitely probably is like a short story writer skill that comes through that way. And it's a great book. I was so impressed, and I did not read it on a road trip. I read it while I've been on jury duty, so it was a different experience for me, but equally enjoyable. But yeah, so thank you everyone. And I'm going to throw in the chat just a link to our newsletter, which is the best way to keep up with future book club picks and things that we're doing. And also the YouTube playlist of all of our previous Zoom calls if you missed them or want to check them out. And this one will go up there soon as well. So yeah, thank you so much everyone, and have a good evening.
Thank you. Thanks again.